The emergency beacon had stopped working 3 hours ago. Dr. Ji-won sat on the edge of the cliff, looking down at the wreckage of her exploration vessel. Smoke still rose from the broken ship, and the jungle around it seemed to swallow the metal and glass like it was nothing important. She tried not to think about how far away help might be. She tried not to think about how long she might have to survive alone on this strange world. Her leg hurt badly. During the crash, something had hit her, and now her left leg felt like it was on fire. Blood had dried on her clothes, but at least the bleeding had stopped. That was good. That meant she might survive long enough for rescue, or at least that was what she told herself to stay calm. Ji-won was a scientist. She had trained for dangerous situations. She had studied other worlds and their dangers, but nothing had prepared her for the feeling of being truly alone on an alien planet. Nothing had prepared her for the sounds of this jungle. Animals called out from the trees. Strange birds with wings that seemed too thin for their bodies flew past. The air smelled like nothing she had ever smelled before, and it made her think of old flowers and wet earth, but not quite. She needed to find shelter. That was the first rule of survival. Shelter, water, food, in that order. The cave system she had spotted from her ship was not far, maybe a kilometer or two. That seemed very far when she could barely walk, but it was her best chance. Ji-won stood up slowly, putting most of her weight on her good leg. The pain shot through her injured leg anyway, but she bit her teeth and did not cry out. She had learned that making noise in a jungle was not a good idea. There were hunters here. She had seen evidence of that in the data her ship had collected before the crash. Large predators roamed these forests. Intelligent predators, the data had said. The kind that hunted in groups. The walk took almost 2 hours. By the time Ji-won could see the cave entrance, her leg was shaking with pain and her head felt light. She was losing blood again. She could feel it, warm on her skin. The cave was just ahead, though. The cave would be safe. Dark places were always safer from predators, or at least that was what she hoped. The cave entrance was large, easily 20 meters wide. Inside, the air was cooler and smelled like stone and water. Ji-won could hear water running somewhere deeper inside. That was perfect. Water meant she could drink. Water meant she could clean her wound. She moved into the darkness, letting her eyes adjust. The cave system was bigger than she had expected. It went deep into the mountain, and the walls were covered in strange crystals that seemed to glow very faintly in the darkness. The light was not bright, but it was enough to see by. Ji-won found a small pool of fresh water coming from a spring. She filled her water bottles and drank deeply. Then she sat down carefully and examined her leg. The wound was not as bad as she had feared. The skin was torn and deep bruising was already forming, but nothing seemed broken. She cleaned it with water from her emergency kit. The pain made her gasp, but she kept going. After she wrapped it carefully with the medical tape from her pack, she felt a little better. Not good, but better. She was still very tired. The adrenaline from the crash was wearing off now, and all she wanted to do was sleep. But it was not dark yet outside. She had to prepare. She had to find firewood and make a fire. She had to find food. She had to do all the things that would keep her alive through the night. Ji-won gathered rocks and made a fire pit near the cave entrance where the smoke could escape, but the fire would keep her warm. She went back outside and collected fallen branches. The forest around the cave was full of dry wood. She worked slowly because of her leg, but she worked steadily. It was while she was gathering the 4th bundle of wood that she first saw them. 3 shapes moved between the trees. At first, Ji-won thought they were just shadows, but then she heard a sound, a low sound, almost like purring but deeper. She froze. The shapes moved closer. They were enormous, 8 feet tall, maybe taller. Their skin was covered in scales that seemed to catch the light, and their eyes were huge and yellow and intelligent. Very intelligent. They had 4 arms each, 2 large ones and 2 smaller ones, and their claws caught the light too. They were definitely predators. They were exactly what the data had warned her about. Ji-won's heart was beating so hard she thought it might burst. She stood very still, trying to remember what to do when you met a dangerous animal. Do not run. Do not scream. Do not make sudden movements. Look big and confident. But then she noticed something strange. The 3 predators were not attacking. They were not even moving toward her. They were just watching, their heads tilted at the same angle, and they seemed curious more than hungry. That was strange. That was very strange. One of them took a small step forward. It was smaller than the other 2. A juvenile, Ji-won realized. They were not adults. They were young ones, cubs, and the other 2, they seemed to be the same age. 3 young predators watching a strange new thing. "I am not food," Ji-won said quietly in Korean, then in the English she used for scientific broadcasts. "I am Dr. Ji-won. I mean no harm." The cubs did not move. They just watched. Their tails, long and thick, moved slowly back and forth behind them like cats' tails. They made those purring sounds again, but quieter this time. Ji-won realized she was not going to die today. These young creatures were not going to attack. They were just curious. Just like her, they wanted to know what she was. She picked up her bundle of wood again and moved slowly toward the cave. The cubs followed at a distance, staying about 10 meters away. They did not attack. They did not chase. They just followed. When she got back to the cave, they sat outside and watched her work. They watched her build the fire. They watched her arrange her supplies, and when night fell and she sat by the fire, eating dried rations from her pack, the 3 cubs settled on the ground outside the cave entrance and watched her eat. Ji-won realized something in that moment. She was not alone anymore. She might not be safe, but she was not alone. Outside the cave, 3 young predators kept watch, curious about this strange creature that had crashed into their world, and Ji-won, for the first time since the crash, felt like she might actually survive this. The first week was the hardest. Ji-won's leg improved slowly, and the 3 cubs never left. They watched her every moment. They watched her sleep. They watched her move around the cave. They watched her when she went to the small pool to clean herself. At first, this constant attention made her nervous. She had been trained that predators should be feared, that their curiosity usually came before an attack. But as the days passed, she began to understand that these cubs were not going to hurt her. They were learning her. That was what Ji-won realized after several days of observation. The cubs were studying her the way she studied them. They watched how she moved, how she gathered things, how she prepared her food. They seemed fascinated by everything she did. By day 5, Ji-won had started giving the cubs names. The smallest one she called Tayo because he was faster and more curious than the others. The middle one was Minho, who seemed to be the gentle one. And the largest was Byung-soo, who was bigger and stronger and seemed to protect the other 2. They slept outside the cave entrance every night. Sometimes Ji-won heard them playing with each other, their forms moving in the moonlight, their claws making soft sounds on the stone. But when she woke in the morning, they were still there, watching and waiting. Her food supplies were running low. Ji-won knew she had only about 2 weeks of dried rations left. After that, she would have to learn to eat what the planet offered. She had already found some fruits and plants that seemed safe. The scanner from her pack said they were not poisonous, and she had tried small amounts. So far, she had not gotten sick. On the 8th day, Ji-won decided to try something different. She had found some of the crystalline fruits that grew near the cave. They were about the size of her fist, and they had a hard outer shell, but inside they were soft and sweet. She gathered a pile of them and brought them back to the cave. The cubs watched as she arranged rocks and started a small fire. They could have started a fire themselves, she realized. The data said the Kethralians were intelligent enough to use tools, but they did not have fire. They ate their food raw, the way most predators did. Jiwon placed some of the fruits on the hot rocks. She had no pan, but the rocks worked almost as well. The fruits began to change. Their insides softened even more, and the sugars started to turn brown. A smell rose from the fire. Sweet and warm and different. The cubs smelled it immediately. They stood up. Their ears, which were usually relaxed, pointed straight up. Their tails moved faster. They were interested, very interested. Jiwon was nervous, but also excited. She was about to do something she had never done before. She was about to share cooked food with alien predators. In all her years of studying xenobiology, she had never imagined she would do something like this. It was dangerous. It was probably a bad idea. But she was curious too. When the fruit was soft and brown, she carefully moved one from the hot rock to a flat stone that she used as a plate. She let it cool for a moment, then took a piece. She put it in her mouth and chewed slowly, enjoying the taste. It was better cooked, much better. The heat had changed the flavor into something more complex and interesting. Then she cut a piece and placed it on another stone. She held it out toward Teo. The small cub did not move. His yellow eyes looked at the fruit, then at her face, then at the fruit again. He was fighting with himself, Jiwon could see. Everything his predator instincts knew told him not to trust this small creature, but his curiosity was strong. "It is okay," Jiwon said softly. "Come, try it." Teo took a step forward, then another. His nose was twitching. He smelled the fruit carefully. He looked at Jiwon one more time, and then he lowered his massive head and took the piece gently from the stone. He chewed it once, twice. His yellow eyes got bigger. His tail started moving very fast. Teo made a sound, a kind of chirping call, and both Minho and Byung-soo came running over. They crowded around Jiwon, their scales catching the firelight, their eyes fixed on the food she was preparing. For the next hour, Jiwon cooked and fed the cubs. She heated more fruit. She found some leaves that she thought might be good. She heated them too. The cubs ate everything she gave them, and their excitement grew with each piece. There was something amazing happening, Jiwon realized. These creatures were experiencing something new. Back home, people talked about how food was just fuel for the body, especially for animals. But these cubs were learning what she had always known. Food could be more than fuel. Food could be pleasure. Food could make you feel good. Food could make you want to sit down and take time to enjoy it instead of just hunting and eating quickly. When she was finished and the cubs were full, they lay down around the fire. Teo rested his enormous head near her lap. Minho and Byung-soo curled up close to each other, their scales reflecting the orange light of the fire. Jiwon reached out and touched Teo's head carefully. She felt the scales, warm and smooth and hard. The cub did not move away. Instead, he made that soft purring sound again. She realized something in that moment. She had been so worried about surviving. She had been so worried about being alone or being eaten. But maybe, just maybe, she had found something better than survival. She had found a connection, a small moment of understanding between two very different creatures. Outside the cave, the alien jungle sang its strange songs. Somewhere far away, predators hunted and killed like they always did. But here, by this fire, a woman and 3 cubs sat together in peace. They had shared more than just food. They had shared something that might change everything. The next morning, when Jiwon woke up, Teo was still lying next to her, his head still near her lap. Minho and Byung-soo were sleeping against each other nearby. They had stayed all night. They had not left to hunt. They had not abandoned her. They had chosen to stay. 2 weeks had passed since Ji-won crashed on Kethral. Her leg was healing well now. She could walk without too much pain, and her limp was becoming lighter each day. The 3 cubs had become as much a part of her daily life as breathing. They went everywhere with her. When she gathered plants and fruits, they followed. When she fetched water from the spring, they waited by the entrance. When she sat to rest in the afternoon, they rested beside her, their massive bodies creating a protective circle around her small human form. Ji-won had begun to keep detailed notes about the cubs. She wrote in a small notebook recording their behaviors, their intelligence, their personalities. Tae-oh was bold and curious, always the first to try new things. Min-ho was thoughtful and careful, watching before he acted. Byung-soo was strong and protective, stepping between Ji-won and anything that seemed threatening, even though she was not sure if the threat was real. More importantly, she had discovered that the cubs were learning from her. When she gathered plants, Tae-oh started helping, using his smaller claws to carefully separate the edible parts from the stems. When she prepared the fire, Min-ho watched closely. And one day he had actually used a fallen branch to push burning wood, copying what she had done many times. It was not perfect, but it showed they were not just following her. They were learning. But today was different. Today, Ji-won heard sounds from deeper in the jungle. Heavy sounds, bigger sounds. Her heart started to beat faster. She stopped moving, and the 3 cubs immediately stopped too. They had learned to read her moods. When Ji-won was worried, they were worried. When Ji-won was calm, they were calm. The sounds came closer. Trees were being pushed aside. Something very large was moving through the jungle. Ji-won moved quickly back to the cave, and the cubs followed. They knew what she meant without her saying anything. Inside the cave, they waited. The sounds got louder. The ground actually shook a little from the weight of whatever was moving out there. Then it appeared at the cave entrance. It was another Kethralian. This one was much larger than the cubs, this one was fully grown, and this one was female. Her scales were a deeper color, almost purple in some places, and her eyes held something that the cubs' eyes did not hold: wisdom, authority. This was a hunter who had lived long and survived many battles. The 3 cubs made sounds that Ji-won had never heard before, chirping sounds, excited and nervous at the same time. They moved toward the female but did not run. They approached carefully, their heads lowered a little in a way that seemed respectful. Ji-won held her breath. She had no weapons. Her scanner was in the cave behind her, but it would not help her against a creature like this. She was completely defenseless. The female Kethralian looked at the cubs first. She made a low sound, and they made the same sound back to her. It was like conversation, Ji-won realized. They were talking. Then the female turned her huge head and looked directly at Ji-won. For a long moment, nothing moved. The female's yellow eyes studied Ji-won carefully, the same way Ji-won had studied the cubs. The female was trying to understand what this small, strange creature was doing here with her cubs. If the female decided that Ji-won was a threat, it would take less than a second for her to cross the cave and kill her. But then Byung-soo did something. He moved to stand next to Ji-won, not between her and the female, but beside her. Min-ho and Tae-oh moved too, forming a small group with her at the center. They were telling the female something. They were telling her that Ji-won was part of their group. The female made another low sound, almost like a growl, but not an angry one. She stepped deeper into the cave. Ji-won could see her fully now. There were scars on her scales, marks from many hunts. This female was a warrior and a survivor. Across her body, Ji-won could see evidence of a hard life. The female settled down on the cave floor, her tail curling around her body. She did not attack. She just watched. The cubs relaxed a little, seeing their mother calm. Wait. Mother. Ji-won realized that this had to be the cub's mother. That was why they had made those special sounds. That was why they had positioned themselves the way they did. "Hello," Ji-won said softly, in English and then in Korean. "I am Ji-won. I mean no harm. I am caring for your cubs." The female did not understand the words, of course, but she seemed to understand something in Ji-won's tone. The female's ears relaxed. She was not a threat, or at least that was what the female was deciding. The cubs approached their mother, and she made a sound that seemed almost like a purr. She smelled them carefully, and then she looked at Ji-won again. Ji-won made a decision. It was a risky decision, but it felt right. She slowly stood up and walked to the fire. She gathered some of the crystalline fruits and placed them on the hot rocks. The cooking process began, and that familiar smell filled the cave. The mother's ears pointed up. Her nose twitched. She smelled the food cooking, and her yellow eyes watched carefully as Ji-won prepared it. When the fruit was ready, Ji-won placed several pieces on stones and moved them toward the mother. She did not come too close. She just made the offering and stepped back. The mother looked at the cubs, then at the food, then at Ji-won. She took a piece and put it in her mouth. Her eyes got very big. Her tail started moving fast. She made a chirping sound, and the cubs made chirping sounds back. It seemed like laughter. It seemed like approval. The mother ate all the pieces that Ji-won had prepared, and then she looked at the fire, then at Ji-won. She was interested, very interested. For the rest of the day, Ji-won cooked for the 4 Kethralians. The mother ate with a kind of careful pleasure that reminded Ji-won of elegant diners at restaurants back home. She did not eat like a predator eating raw meat. She ate like someone who was discovering something beautiful for the first time. As the sun began to set, the mother made a low sound, and the cubs responded immediately. They seemed to be preparing to leave. The mother stood, her scales shimmering in the firelight. She looked at Ji-won for a long moment. Then the mother did something that made Ji-won's breath catch. She lowered her head, touching it gently to Ji-won's shoulder. It was not an aggressive move. It was not a threatening move. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, of respect, of gratitude. The mother and cubs left the cave and disappeared into the jungle. But as Ji-won settled down to sleep that night, she knew something had changed. She had been accepted, not just by the cubs, but by their family, by their group. She was part of something now, part of a new kind of family. A month had passed since Ji-won first crashed on Kethral. Her emergency rations were completely gone now. She lived entirely on what the planet provided, but she was surviving. Better than surviving. She was thriving. Her leg was almost healed. Her supplies had been organized into a functional living space. And her family, as she now thought of the Kethralians, had grown. The mother came by regularly, sometimes staying for a full day. The 3 cubs were always there, sleeping in the cave entrance at night, hunting with Ji-won during the day. But other Kethralians had started to appear too. Older cubs, almost teenagers by Ji-won's guess. Younger cubs, barely tall enough to reach her shoulders. The mother brought them to the cave, 1 or 2 at a time, and introduced them to this strange human and her cooking. Ji-won realized what was happening. She was teaching not just 3 cubs, she was teaching an entire family group, maybe even an entire tribe. Today, she had 7 Kethralians in the cave. 7. It was the largest group yet, and they were all waiting for the feast. Ji-won had spent the entire morning preparing. She had gathered a variety of plants and fruits. She had found some small animals in traps she had set by accident, and while she had felt bad about it, the Kethralians had eaten the meat raw before she could feel too guilty. She had also found some mushrooms growing near the cave, and her scanner confirmed they were safe to eat. She had even discovered a way to make a kind of bread from ground seeds and water, baked on hot rocks. The mother, whom Jiwon now called Seo in her mind because of the way the cubs had made that sound when greeting her, sat on a high rock overlooking the whole operation. She watched everything with her intelligent yellow eyes. Sometimes she made small sounds, and Jiwon swore the female was giving her suggestions about how to improve the cooking. "You know what you are doing, do you not?" Jiwon said to her, speaking in English even though Seo could not understand the words. "You are showing me how to do this better. You have ideas about food and preparation." Seo made a low, rumbling sound that might have been agreement. The feast began. Jiwon served the roasted fruits first. These were now something of a specialty. The heat transformed them into something almost dessert-like, with the sugar turned dark and sweet. The Kethralians ate them with a kind of reverent care. They did not tear at the food like hungry predators. They chewed slowly and carefully, seeming to taste every aspect of it. Then came the cooked plants, leaves that had been heated and softened, their flavors transformed by the process. Some of them actually tasted better cooked than raw, Jiwon had discovered. Byung-soo seemed particularly fond of one type of leaf, and he ate more of it than anyone else. Finally, Jiwon brought out the bread. She had made it thick and soft, and she had cooked it until the outside was slightly brown. When she broke a piece and showed them, steam came out. The smell was amazing. One of the younger cubs, who was seeing this food for the first time, made an excited chirping sound. He looked at his mother for permission. The mother made a small sound of approval, and the young cub carefully took a piece of bread. He sniffed it. He licked it with his long tongue. He bit off a small piece and chewed it thoughtfully. His eyes grew very wide. He made a chirping sound to the other cubs. It sounded like he was telling them this was the best thing he had ever tasted in his entire life. Everyone wanted bread after that. As Jiwon watched them eat, she started to understand something deeper about what was happening here. This was not just about food. This was about change, fundamental change to how these creatures experienced their world. Predators by nature lived for the hunt. They lived to catch and kill and consume. It was all happening very quickly, driven by hunger and instinct. But what Jiwon was teaching them was different. She was teaching them to slow down. She was teaching them to prepare, to wait, to anticipate pleasure instead of just grabbing it when you found it. These changes meant that they began to gather together more. They talked more, those strange chirping and rumbling sounds becoming more complex. They rested together after eating, lying in the shade near the cave, their bodies touching in affectionate clusters. They played with each other, wrestling and rolling, but not fighting, not actually trying to hurt each other. They were becoming more than just hungry predators. They were becoming a community. Teo had developed a particular skill. He had started helping Jiwon gather and prepare ingredients. The other Kethralians watched him, and soon they were helping too. Minho had learned to use sticks to push hot food without burning himself. Byung-soo had become the guardian of the fire, keeping it from spreading and helping Jiwon control its heat. Even some of the older cubs had started to help. One evening, after all the guests had left and only the 3 original cubs remained, Teo did something remarkable. He approached the pile of fruits that Jiwon had gathered for the next day. He carefully selected some of the ripest ones and placed them on the hot rocks. Then he made a soft sound to Jiwon, as if asking her to watch. He was trying to cook. He did not understand all the details, but he understood the basic idea. Heat changes food. Change makes it better. He wanted to try making food the way she did. Jiwon helped him adjust the temperature and timing, but she mostly let him do it himself. When the fruits were ready, she tasted them. They were slightly overcooked, but they were definitely edible. They were definitely food that Teo had made himself. She touched his head the way Seo had touched her shoulder that day weeks ago. It was a gesture of respect and approval. Teo made that deep, purring sound, the sound that meant contentment. Minho and Byung-soo wanted to try cooking next. They were not as good at it as Tae-o, and their preparations were not as successful. But they tried. They learned. They failed and tried again. This was what civilization was, Ji-won realized. Not just individuals surviving alone. It was groups of beings learning to do things together, learning to create, learning to improve, learning to share not just food, but the knowledge of how to make that food. She had come to Kethral as a scientist studying an alien species, but she was becoming something more. She was becoming a teacher. She was becoming a mother to these cubs. She was becoming the beginning of something that might change these creatures forever. As the sun set over the jungle, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange, Ji-won sat by her fire with 3 massive alien predators lying peacefully around her. The smell of cooked food filled the cave. The sounds of the jungle were gentle and far away. And for the first time since the crash, Ji-won felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She was home. 6 weeks had passed since Ji-won came to live in the cave. The jungle had become familiar. The sounds of the animals were no longer frightening. The strange plants had become like old friends. Her leg was fully healed now. She could run, she could climb, she could move through the forest with almost as much skill as the Kethralians. But today, something changed. The birds stopped singing. The insects stopped making their constant noise. The jungle went quiet. The 3 cubs immediately stopped what they were doing and moved closer to Ji-won. Their ears pointed forward. Their tails were stiff. They were alert. "What is it?" Ji-won asked softly. She did not need them to answer. She heard it. Sounds from far away but coming closer. Heavy footsteps, deep voices, other Kethralians, but not their family. These sounds were different, harder, more aggressive. Tae-o made a sound to the other cubs, and they both moved to position themselves between Ji-won and the cave entrance. They were protecting her. They were preparing for a fight. A moment later, the first of the strangers appeared. These were not family. Ji-won could tell immediately. Their scales were darker and scarred. They moved with an aggressive tension that was very different from Seo's family. There were 5 of them, big ones, old ones, hunters. Their leader, a massive male with a scar that ran down one side of his face, stopped at the cave entrance. He looked at Tae-o, Minho, and Byung-soo like they were nothing. Then his yellow eyes found Ji-won. His expression changed. His lips pulled back, showing his teeth. He made a sound that was definitely not friendly. "We know you are here," he said in a strange, broken form of English. The data had said some Kethralians could learn language. This one apparently could. "We smell you. We smell the food. We smell territory that is not marked." "This is not your territory," Tae-o said. His English was much better, clearer. He had been listening to Ji-won talk to herself, learning the language. "This is Seo's territory. This is our home." "Seo is weak," the scarred male said. "She plays with fire and food like a child. We are strong. We are hunters. This territory will be ours." More of them appeared behind the leader. They were pushing into the cave, their massive bodies filling the space. Tae-o, Minho, and Byung-soo stood their ground, but Ji-won could see they were scared. They were almost adults, but they were still young. The scarred male and his group were fully grown and hardened by battle. The scarred male took another step forward. He was reaching toward Ji-won. His claws were extended. He made a sound like laughter, cruel and hard. "After we take the territory, we will decide what to do with this small creature. It smells interesting. Maybe we eat it. Maybe we keep it as a pet. Maybe—" He did not get to finish his sentence. A shape erupted from the back of the cave like a predator striking at prey. It was Seo. But Seo was different. Her scales were bristling with anger. Her eyes were blazing. Her claws were extended fully, and she moved with a speed and power that even the scarred male did not expect. She did not attack to kill. That was the first thing Ji-won noticed. Seo could have killed the scarred male in seconds. Her claws could tear through his scales like they were paper. Her teeth could rip out his throat. But she did not. Instead, she used her body to physically force him backward. She was pushing him out of the cave. The scarred male tried to fight back, but Seo was faster and stronger. More importantly, she was fighting with a different kind of fury. This was not just a predator fighting for territory. This was a mother fighting to protect her family. Tae-oh, Min-ho, and Byung-soo joined their mother. They used their bodies to push the intruders backward. Still, they did not kill. They did not tear and rip. They forced the intruders out of the cave and into the daylight. The scarred male and his group retreated into the jungle, making angry sounds. They did not go far. They circled the cave entrance, looking for an opportunity to attack again. "They will not leave," Seo said to her cubs. Her English was not as clear as the cubs, but it was understandable. "They will try again. They are desperate. They are hungry for territory and power." Ji-won realized that Seo had been learning too. The female had been listening to Ji-won, and the cubs speak English. The cooking and the food had not been the only changes happening in this cave. "We need to be ready," Min-ho said. But Seo shook her great head. "No, we need to show them a better way." She looked at Ji-won, and the human understood what the female was suggesting. Ji-won quickly gathered fruit and wood. She prepared a fire right at the entrance of the cave where the intruders could see it. She began to cook, her hands steady despite her fear. The smell of cooking food drifted out into the jungle. The scarred male and his group came back to the entrance. They were curious. They were hungry. Ji-won could see them sniffing the air, trying to understand what they were smelling. "Come," Seo said. She made her voice calm and peaceful. "Come and see. Come and taste." The scarred male was suspicious. His group was suspicious. But hunger and curiosity were strong forces. One of them took a step forward. Seo did not threaten. She moved aside. She made room. Ji-won handed a piece of cooked food to the first intruder. He took it cautiously. He ate it. His entire body seemed to pause as the flavor reached his mind. His eyes grew big. One by one, the intruders came forward. One by one, they tasted the cooked food. Their aggressive postures began to relax. Their aggressive sounds became quieter. "What is this?" the scarred male asked, his hard voice cracking a little. "This is peace," Ji-won said simply. "This is community. This is family. You do not need to fight us. You can join us. You can learn with us. You can change with us." The scarred male looked at the food in his claws. He looked at Seo and her cubs. He looked back at Ji-won. "My name is Hai-il," he said finally. "My group is hungry, not just for food. We are hungry for something we did not have a name for. We were so focused on fighting that we forgot that there might be other things." "There are," Seo said. "Let us show you." That night, the scarred male and his group sat around the fire, not as enemies, but as guests. They were still fierce, they were still dangerous, but they were also learning that there was more to life than pure aggression and hunting. Ji-won looked around the cave at all the Kethralians gathered there. Her original 3 cubs, Seo and her immediate family, and now these new arrivals. Her family was growing, her community was growing. She did not know if she would ever be rescued. She was beginning to think that maybe she did not need to be rescued. Maybe she had found exactly where she was supposed to be. In a cave on an alien world, teaching predators about peace, community, and the transformative power of a shared meal.